Ed, now, if you're paying the slightest bit of attention to what's going on over the next little while, certainly over here, over the last couple of years, in fact, it's Nebraska against Northwestern in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic at the Aviva. It's tomorrow evening. Delighted to say Zack Carpenter, reporter on all things Nebraska for the Rivals Network, is with us. Zack, good morning to you.
Morning, guys. Appreciate you having me. First time out of the U.S. and first time in Ireland, so I've been learning.
Good man.
I just heard about hurling, got the whole lowdown on that from the Uber driver on the way over here.
Did you?
Yeah.
He was like, did he try to explain to you that it's not as dangerous as it looks? That's typically what we say to people.
I think that's what he was getting at, but it's like fast, physical. Like he told me look up like some YouTube highlights. I had two Uber drivers tell me that exact same thing. Like look up best of hurling. I'm like, all right. Now that two people have told me, I actually have to
need to go and do that.
Have to go and do that because it's interesting just to hear. It's like an offensive, fast-paced game, like kind of like basketball, where the offense is at the advantage and you're expected to score. So. Interesting.
Offensive, depending on which team you're behind. That is definitely debatable. Come here. We wanted to get you in to sort of explain to us. So for the likes of myself, who'll be heading along tomorrow, who hasn't really a clue what they're looking at, we wanted you to give us a bit of a look under the bonnet of exactly what we should be expecting. And from an Irish point of view, we love an underdog. So who should we be behind?
Northwestern, then. But it's interesting because so I cover Nebraska from there. And in the last 4 years, Nebraska, just to sort of like give a quick background, in the 90s, they won 3 national championships. They were like a powerhouse right up there with like Miami and Notre Dame in the 90s. And then they had one bad coaching hire, and then like, you know how things kind of roll kind of downhill from there. And now they're trying to get back to that same precipice. They went 3-9 last year, and that like the running joke in college football media is that Nebraska was the best 3-9 team in like college football history because they lost 9 games. All were by 9 points or less. 8 of them were by one possession or less. So they're like ranked in the top 25 of the college football analytics, even though they went 3-9. So it's not as if they're just like this power or whatever, but they are the favorite on Saturday. They're 13.5-point favorites, and so if you're looking for an underdog, I go with the purple team, the Wildcats. I mean, they maybe they endear themselves to Ireland a little bit. They're wearing on their helmets they have an N logo, and they're like they did an alternate color where like the Irish flag colors, which actually looks pretty slick if you check it out.
Well, we're suckers for that sort of stuff, so that's us signed up straight away.
So everyone's a Northwestern fan now in Ireland. So,
talk to us about the just reading up about the game and the nuances of it. And the Nebraska offensive coordinator who just wants to pass, and the Northwestern defensive coordinator who has built his reputation at the Browns and the 49ers trying to stop the passing game. So it seems from everything I've read that seems to be the pivotal. Winning and losing of this game. Who comes out on top of that?
On top of that, I think from Nebraska's point of view, offensively, they have pretty much a new offense at every position group, new quarterback, new running backs, at least at the core, new receivers. Offensive line is a big question mark, and that's what we keep harping on is as this Nebraska offensive line goes, their offensive success will go because there's been some injuries and some instability, suspension to one of their starters before the start of the season. So that's sort of the main thing to watch. Like, can they hold up in pass protection? And some of the offensive coordinators' plays. I mean, he's a genius as far as designing like schemes to get guys open and running crossing routes and rub routes are what they're called, but. That's kind of why I see this as being a low-scoring game.
Really?
Just because I was just explaining this earlier today. Nebraska has new offensive coordinator, completely new offensive staff, along with all their new personnel player-wise. They have new offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach, new receivers coach, and a new running backs coach. So the only assistant still intact is the tight ends coach, who's one of the best tight ends coaches in America. But all those new faces, it's week 0 is what they call it. It's the first game of the year. The defense is always ahead of the offense traditionally. Throw in an overseas trip to Ireland from the middle of the U.S. all the way to Ireland. So have all these different things coalescing on offense from an X's and O's football standpoint. And then add all those other extenuating factors. So that's why I'm kind of looking like it could be a defensive game. So maybe that would play in Northwestern's favor. But Nebraska also has one of the better defenses in college football last year. So just another interesting little factor all rolled into one game to start off the season.
How, like, I mean, you talk about being 13.5 favourites. I assume that there is an element of guesswork that goes into that favourites tag this early in the season, that you're week 0, and obviously with college sports there's going to be a huge turnover every single season. Is that the case where basically in week 0 you've got more chance of an upset happening when it comes to flying in the face of predictions than any other week?
Well, and especially with this one because of, like I said, the travel. I mean, both teams had to do it. So, but Northwestern was at a little bit more of a disadvantage because they got here a day late. And as I was just explaining, from personal experience, getting here a day earlier would be really nice to have the jet lag kind of dissipate, because I was supposed to get here Wednesday morning, and multiple flight delays and missed connecting flights because of those delays pushed me back a whole day. So now I'm like kind of flying by the seat of my pants a little bit, and I'm like, all right, that does make a difference, even though you're not like necessarily wouldn't think of that, or you might roll your eyes like, oh, it's just one day. But Northwestern's at a slight disadvantage of that. But to get back to your question, when the odds makers make those lines, like, it's unbelievable the analytical process that goes into it. A lot of it's returning production from the previous season. So Nebraska's returning on defense, at least, one of the better front sevens, defensive line and linebackers in the conference. And you are bringing in, like, I don't know how big recruiting is in Ireland. With
that doesn't happen, basically. Well, unless you're Chemical Crokes and you're stealing some of the... It doesn't really happen.
Right. And then on the flip side, Northwestern's kind of one of those cyclical programs. Like 2 years ago, they were in the Big Ten, the conference championship game, and had one of their better seasons in the last decade. And then last year, I think they were 2-10, I want to say, somewhere along those lines. So it's like Northwestern's a very hard school to recruit to and get top tier talent, so they have to develop them over the course of 2, 3, 4 years. So seems like every third, fourth year they'll have a pretty standout team. But that kind of all goes into it, traditional. But you're right, kind of on the right path there. If there's a little bit of guesswork just because it is so early, and it's like, what do we know? We don't know what we don't know.
What obviously a big chance for some of the Nebraska edge defenders, with the excitement that's around the player who's touted for for future NFL in Skoronsky. Who should we be looking out for? Like, if I'm there tomorrow now, give me some names and numbers here that I should be mark my card, essentially.
I would go with the Nebraska side because that's what I'm obviously most familiar with. But Casey Thompson, number 11, the quarterback. There was a quarterback battle, like, for who would be the starter between Casey Thompson and Chubba Purdy. They're both transfers. Casey Thompson's from Texas, Chubba Purdy's from Florida State, and sort of a battle back and forth. But it was funny because I think from the sources that I was talking to, and just in general, like the rumblings you hear, it's like, all right, this is Casey Thompson's job to lose. And then Scott Frost, their head coach, came out and said that like about 3 weeks ago. So it kind of felt like Casey was going to win that job all along. But in American football, you are typically, especially these days, you're going to go as far as your quarterback will take you, and especially in an offensive system like Nebraska has under their new coordinator. So he's far and away the number one player to watch, and he's experienced from games at Texas. Like, he's put up stats, he's put up some big numbers before. But it's going to be interesting to see new environment. He had a shoulder surgery in the offseason that he was kind of working his way through. So that's by far the number one thing that I'm most interested in. General fans would be most interested in, because he has an arm. I mean, he's extremely talented. Just will that kind of show itself on the field? But then after that, I mean, if we're flipping to the defensive side of the ball, Nebraska has three of the best, like maybe like collectively, three of the best edge rushers, like defensive ends, and Garrett Nelson, number 44, O'Shawn Mathis, number 32, and Caleb Tanner, number 2. There's been a lot of discussion, like, if these three guys all get on the field at the same time in pass rushing situations, then they could tee off and there could be some electric plays with a sack, fumble, or an interception return for a touchdown. And then Nebraska has two of the best probably the best linebacking duo, or one of them in the Big Ten, and Luke Reimer and Nick Heinrich. So a lot of names to kind of keep track of, but if we're boiling it down to just one, to keep it simple, Casey Thompson, number 11, is the guy to keep an eye on.
Giving me enough to bluff my way through it tomorrow. That's going to.
I was going to say, just listen back to this. Listen back to
I'm
this.
going to be taking notes from that.
Yeah.
I've been to a game in Boston College before and a game in South Bend not that long ago, and they are incredible occasions that we, as an Irish audience, really struggle to get our heads around the scale of it. But they're huge. It's obviously a monster sport in the US, and they are huge spectacles apart from anything else, aren't they?
Oh yeah, college football, it's interesting, especially in the South. Like if you're going to Alabama, Louisiana, or Mississippi, it's like a completely different world. Like LSU, it's in Louisiana State. It's like if you go down there, I think like the town population like almost doubles in size on a game day just because of how many people kind of flock. It's like it's an event. And I was just actually saying that in the Uber over here to my driver. It's like college football and like just sports in general are an event, and it's like a completely different culture for college football. I was kind of curious because I've been talking about this a little bit about American football in Ireland. I mean, do you guys feel like American football has a chance of sticking here? Because I'm kind of getting the sense that no.
Oh, well, American football or college football, I guess it's two entirely different questions. I think American football has stuck already. There's a huge American football market, but it's NFL-based. I think the college game, I think the unique selling point is always going to be around the pageantry and around the colour that you have at the college games that is unparalleled, even to a degree when you compare it with NFL teams. And I think that probably is the way of tapping into the Irish psyche, is the occasion around those college games, seeing a town completely taken over. It's in a way, it's almost akin to Gaelic games here, where it's like pride of place, and it's like a town like say University of Alabama that is known for nothing other than the University of Alabama. What's the name of the town?
Tuscaloosa.
Tuscaloosa, sorry, yeah. So, the only reason I've ever heard of that is because of the university and the football team, and it's just that attachment with that team, with that football team, that gives that sense of identity to the people of Tuscaloosa. That's my read on it, and I think that that's quite similar to Gaelic games in a lot of small towns around Ireland. So I think that's probably the
sort of my understanding of Gaelic games and hurling was, again, conversation. I think Michael was the Uber driver's name, telling me that it's very, like you said, community-based, like you're in a parish growing up, and then you kind of, like, the best players stick with that community, that team throughout their careers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So
no, I think it's a good, that comparison is a good one. And listen, I know the people are going to be turning out in their thousands tomorrow as well, so we look forward to it. Thanks a million for coming in, Zack Carpenter, and good luck with the game tomorrow. We'll see which way it goes. I'll be watching this and repeat and taking my little notes from it as well ahead of the Aer Lingus College Football Classic tomorrow, Nebraska up against Northwestern.